that she's here, so welcome, Susan. By profession, Ron is a structural engineer. He retired in 2012. He's been a member of Queen City Yacht Club for over 50 years. And in 2015 and 2016, he was Commodore of the club. Ron began sailing at QCY Junior Club. He then sailed and raced on his dad's 6-meter International 14s, then Sharks. At the age of 60, he bought the boat he first admired at age 25, a CNC designed Viking 34. Ron's lifetime sailing highlights include a transatlantic crossing in 2007, sailing to the Antarctica in 2008, crewing on a replica 1906 Thomas Milne designed 12-meter at the Antigua Classic Yacht Regatta in 2014, and sailing the 6-meter Worlds in his dad's old boat in 2017. Ron has spoken at Shellbacks previously, April 2009, with his wife Pam, on their sailing adventure from Ushuaia to Antarctica and back. As you may know, his twin brother is Rob, and some of you may have even called him Rob today, similarity. And today he will speak on how he got to the 6-meter Worlds in Vancouver, a 50-year journey. Please give Ron a warm Shellbacks welcome.
Thank you. And just to avoid any further confusion, I am Ron. My brother is Rob. We are twins. Rob could not be here today, which is unfortunate because I was planning on he being my technical backup on all items historical and technical with respect to 6 meters and Canadian sailing. But he assures me that his wife Zaw has lived through all this and is equally informed of all such matters.
And better looking.
The important face being lived through.
So far living through. What I'm talking about today is a personal adventure. A 50-year journey from my dad owning a 6-meter in 1962, and then his boys crewing on it, and then losing contact with that boat for over 50 years, and then getting a phone call from Kit Wallace, who's right here, asking, did your family once own a 6-meter named Kisita? And I said, yeah. Why? Well, Kit says, my brother, his brother, Mark, on Salt Spring Island, is a shipwright, working for a fellow in Vancouver who has an incomprehensible passion for 6 meters and has restored and owns anywhere from 12 to 20? It's unknown how many he owns. And he is looking for another one to restore, and he's looking at your old boat. And then that time passed, and it turns out that the owner wasn't interested. Then time passed again, it turned out he was interested. The next thing I know, the boat is en route to Salt Spring Island for restoration. And then at early 2017, at a corporate event that my company runs, Kit comes up to me and says, how would you like to crew on your old boat in the 2017 6-meter World Championships in Vancouver? And so this, I said yes. My brother Rob could not make it because he had a commitment on a cruise in Scandinavia, which involves numerous visits to Scandinavian marine museums, which you will all hear about at a forthcoming Shellbacks dinner. So this talk is in excruciating detail about my adventure on Kisita, the restoration of Kisita, and the 6-meter class. And there's probably people in this room, there's no good rooms in this room, is there? No. The name good room keeps popping up in the history of 6 meters. So I want to talk about the history of 6 meters, both internationally and on Lake Ontario, and they talk about the restoration of Kisita, and they talk about the World Championships in Vancouver 2017. So you cover a lot of ground. And this is on, that's good. So the first thing is, what is 6 meter? So many people who I'm sure know this because you went to my brother's talk on the international rule, right?
Yeah.
So you all know this, but in case somebody missed it or wasn't taking notes, here's a 35 seconds what Rob covered in probably an hour or more. The international rule is a European rule established in 1906, mainly pushed by the Brits, from what I gathered, so that all European countries could sail against each other. And so they developed a formula so they could rate boats to essentially sail, if not one design, boat against boat without a handicap. They did that in 1906. The 6 meter is a product of that, as is the 12 meter, the 8 meter, the 15 meter, the 10 meter. They're all meter boats. And it was, the 6 meter was probably the most successful of the classes in numbers. And that's what governs a 6 meter, and that's what governs a 12 meter, a 10 meter, and 15 meter. A very simple rule, plus about an inch thick book on further restrictions on what you can do within the class. But it's very simple, involves waterline length. And I had to ask Rob what this 2D thing was, but the difference between skin girth and chain girth. And if you really want to know, you can ask me later, because I'll try to. It has to do with the curve of the hull versus the straight line. Square root of the sail area minus V-bore divided by a number, which kept changing over the years. This is called the third rule. There are two previous rules that evolved over time, but that essentially defines the boat. This is a photograph of the British-American challenge, which developed after the First World War. The 6 meters were probably the predominant international racing class between the wars, from the 1920s, 30s, and into the 40s. This is a photograph of 1921 showing probably first rule boats, and that's what they looked like then. But they're so predominantly international racing, the Americans actually allowed the international rule to be used for small boat sailing. So they retained their universal rule, which generated the R boats, the P boats, and the J boats for the big boats, i.e. the America's Cup was the J boats. But they allowed international sailing to be done on 6 meters, and so the Americans were big players in this as well. This is a shot of Marinito in Long Island Sounds in 1928. It was owned and sailed by the Finns. It came over to North America for a Gold Cup challenge on Long Island Sound. Again, because in 1928 the Americans allowed meter boats to be sailing in small class. This is a famous Canadian story because George Goodrum, and the name Goodrum keeps popping up in the story, bought Marinito and brought her back to RCYC, and she was the first international rule boat in Canada. And he brought her back because there was interest in sailing the Canada's Cup in 10 meters. Eventually became 8 meters, but they wanted to see what these meter boats were all about. Now, unfortunately, Marinito was an orphan in Canada for many years because the next 6 meter was Aphrodite, which Bob knows a little bit about, and that came in 1932, I think. So it wasn't, but so Norm Goodrum and Walter Whittier sailed Marinito in 30s and 40s, primarily against our boats. And then she was eventually bought in the 40s and went to Royal Hamilton as mermaid. But isn't she beautiful? And she's got the classic 6 meter lines. Now Lake Ontario 6 meters, Marinito came in 1928, so I've got 1928 as the first date. But really the Lake Ontario 6 meters didn't get going until after the war, after the Second World War. As I said, they were Olympic class from up to 1952. They weren't supposed to be an Olympic class in 1952. They were supposed to be phased out in 48, and the 5.5 was supposed to be the Olympic class. But the 52 Olympics was in Helsinki, and the Scandinavians lobbied hard with the Canadian Olympic people to keep the 6 meter in because they were still popular in Scandinavia. As a result, Bill Goodrum contacted George Cuthbertson to find a boat for the Helsinki Olympics, and George contacted a naval architect in Sweden named Knud Reimers, whose name will come up later on in this story, to help them find one. They found a boat called Trixton in Stockholm, renamed it Buzzy 2, which you may have heard of, and they sailed it 400 miles from Stockholm to Helsinki for the 1952 Olympics, then brought it back to Canada. It came back to Canada in 1952 after the Olympics. It was KC6. So even in 52, there were only 6 meters in Canada. But after the war, and after the 52 Olympics, when the class was no longer Olympic, I guess what happened is a lot of good boats went on the market. And the class was, quite frankly, dying in Europe at that time, and these boats came to North America. And so the heyday of 6 meter sailing on the Great Lakes was the 1950s and 60s. And I have a photograph here, which is a complete mystery to me. It's a photograph at Queen City Yacht Club in 1959, taken by Peter Jones on top of the mast crane with his Brownie box camera. And it shows, interestingly enough, of the 9 boats there, it shows 5 Tumlarens, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now here's 5 Tumlarens. And, much to my amazement, 2 6 meters. That one and that one. And I vaguely remember I thought Kisita, when it came to Queen City in 62, was the first 6 meter in the club. Obviously not. If anybody in this room can identify which 2 6 meters those are, I'd love to know, because I've asked Alan and I've asked Peter Jones, and they have Peter has a vague memory of there being an RCYC member who was also a member of Queen City, who brought these boats over to have Queen City challenge RCYC for a trophy coming up in that year. And Rob has some theories about that, might be, but I'd love to know what those 2 boats are, because I was like 12 years old. Alan hasn't had them.
Just as an aside, those Tumlarens, which I grew up in, were also designed by Knud Reimers.
I'm getting to that.
Okay.
I'm getting to
Sorry, Ron.
George Cuthbertson sadly passed away recently. He had a huge, I've already mentioned his involvement with Buzzy 2, but his early sailing was in 6 meters on the ex-Marinito Mermaid of Hamilton, and he was involved with, as I mentioned, getting Buzzy 2 to Canada, and he was also involved with getting Gallant to Canada. And so there's a long history with 6 meters with him, and also a link with Reimers that I will go into detail a bit later. This is a list of these, again from my brother, 6 meter fleet on Lake Ontario. And so a lot of names you're going to recognize there. Marinito's KC1, Totem's KC3, Buzzy 2 I mentioned, KC6, then Cersei came over, Karen, Divis. These are all names I grew up with. I mean, These boats were the rock stars of Canadian sailing on the Lake Ontario when I was a kid. Gallant, Joanna Rue, Tisha, which Bill Goodman won the Cup in 1959. Mood, I think, is the only one still probably left on the lake. No, sorry, Mrs. is the only one. Buzzy Cree. Buzzy Cree, there's a model of Buzzy Cree in the foyer, beautiful model. You haven't looked at it, go look at it. Buzzy Cree was the only 6 meter actually built in Canada. It was built by J.J. Taylor here in Toronto, it's Sparkman Stevens design. And it's KC-25. My dad's boat, Kisita, is KC-26. So we're guessing it came to Canada probably in the late 50s. But I'll cover that in more detail when we get to that boat. And the U.S. fleet, of course, has some household names. Stork, which is now Lucy 3, Star Wagon, the very famous Sparkman Stevens design Goose. Were all famous boats in the day. The boats that are highlighted as red are still sailing and were at the 2017 World Championship in Vancouver this year. And so that's why I highlighted them in red. Now let's talk about a particular 6 meter, which was not famous on the Lake Ontario 6 meter racing because it came too late. Kisita 2 was designed by Newt Reimers, who lived from 1906 to 1987. So he actually saw the boat again when he was in Canada in a trip in the 1970s. It was built in Denmark. This is an actual photograph of it in the 1930s that still exists in the Stockholm Marine Museum. It was built for Baron Brockdorf in Denmark. Reimers is a prolific yacht designer who actually had some good fortune based on somebody else's bad luck. He is Danish and went to work for Gustav Ecklander, who was also Danish and a very famous naval architect at the time with an office in Stockholm. Ecklander hired Reimers quite young, he was in his early 20s, and then promptly died within a couple of years. So Reimers, in his mid-20s, took over Ecklander's practice. And I think that all happened in about 1930. And shortly thereafter, within 4 years of that, in 1934, he designed my dad's boat, Kisita, and also, as Alan mentioned, the boat you might have heard of, the Tumlaren. If my calculations right, he's 29 years old at about this time. Tumlaren, over I think 900 of them were built, apparently less than half of actual official plans, meaning they only got royalties for half the boats that were actually built. Reimers primarily designed square meter boats, 20 square meters, 30 square meter boats. He did design 5 6 meters, and Kisita was one of them. He had a long-standing friendship with George Pepperson. I already mentioned George being asked to find a fast 6 meter for the 52 Helsinki Olympics. First thing he did was contact drivers in Stockholm for his help. In '54, when they were looking for an 8 meter for the Canada Cup, the first person he contacted was Reimers, and found one in George looking for the largest 8 meter to find for the Canada Cup, but the Americans scooped it on before he could get it. So they had to buy Venture 2 in Detroit, and that's a whole saga in itself. But George also was asked to find a replacement for Harry Griggs' Alden Scooter, And again, he went to Reimers and found Metre, and then sailed Metre across the Atlantic back to Canada in '54 before the Canada Cup. And when Reimers came to visit Toronto in the '70s, he and George met them. So there's a nice connection between our most famous and beloved Canadian architect and new Reimers. The drawings of Kisita still exist. They are in the Stockholm Marine Museum, as all of the Reimers drawings are. So when it came time to rebuild Kisita, they were invaluable. And again, if you want to know more about the Stockholm Marine Museum, come to my brother's presentation of it, forthcoming at Shellbacks, and you'll hear all you need to hear. Kisita came into our lives in 1962. My dad just announced he had bought the boat. I remember he took it for a test sail with Al Ray Sr. and Bobby Norton, and they sailed it, and they came back to the Great Hall of Queen City and had a few beers, started talking, and Al Ray Sr. described it as a real thoroughbred of a boat. I'm not sure Al Ray then knew whether that was the same designer as the Tom Laren. But we had from about 1962 to about '67. Then we got heavily involved. We just graduated from Junior Club, sailed that boat for 5 years, and then got into international 14s, falling with a bad crowd. Including Ellen. Well, I lost my train of thought.
Was the bad crowd?
There's my dad with the pipe. My mom is on the left. My dad was a war veteran. He enlisted at 18. He met my mom in Sheffield, brought her back to Canada, got a job in the fire department, ended up in Toronto Island, ended up joining Queen City, ended up sitting with Al Ray Sr., ended up buying Kisita. It wasn't the first classic boat he bought. He had a couple of power boats. They would just appear in our lives. Your dad would come home with a boat. And this was one of them. This is Orion. And I don't know any of the history of that boat. But his next boat, bought with Ken Sinclair, was called Blythewood. And it was a Ditchburn-built, double-plank, rosewood hull, Muskoka launch, originally owned by McLaughlin Buick in Muskoka, and then Muskoka in the '60s fell out of fashion, and this boat. So my dad owned this boat for a couple of years and sold it, and then years later I saw this. And so Blythewood has been completely restored. So my dad had a real eye for classic boats that would eventually live on. But he came home with Kisita, and that's her. She's 38 feet long and less than 6 feet wide, a classic 6 meter. Painted white would be had it. It was a cruising 6 when it came over. It had been converted from an open cockpit racing 6 meter to a cuddy cabin. Again, that's my mom. That might be me. That might be Rob.
You can't tell.
I think it's Rob. But there's a picture of the deck layout, and you can see the cabin. It was a really beautifully built cabin. It was very reminiscent of the Tom Laren cabin or 30 square meter cabins. And so we're pretty certain it was actually done in Denmark and probably converted after the war. The class virtually died in Denmark after the war, and that's when these boats were shipped over. And it was, again, by '62, there was virtually no 6 meter sailing on Lake Ontario. Sorry, in Toronto. The fleet had gone to Hamilton. There was an active fleet in Hamilton in the '60s that lasted until about 1968. Then that fleet converted over to Viking 28s. And all the boats gradually migrated to Washington State and the Seattle area. But we moored her on the lagoon. When my dad bought it, he bought it from a fellow named Herb Yates. And Herb, H-Y, had the boat named High Winds. H-Y, winds. My dad reverted back to its original name, Kisita. I have no idea how he knew that was its original name. He spelled it wrong. He spelled it with 2 T's. So there's lots of confusion later on as to what the name of the boat actually was. But my dad, as I said, got out of the army, joined the fire department, came to the island, and that's the Toronto Island Fire Station there, right beside the Kisita Yacht Club. So it was originally at Center Island, but when they tore the main drag down, they moved the fire station down here, and he worked there. And this is an amazing photograph because it was actually a calendar photograph that we found. And there's Kisita beside a tall iron. And at the time, we didn't know there was the same design of the boat. And that's her pictures, tall iron, KC1. The other boats are Thunderbirds, and they're the first Thunderbirds. That's Bill Stevenson. He built that in the backyard of the island. I'm not sure who the other one is. This is early 60s. They're all wooden boats at the club. Fiberglass hadn't quite had its impact yet. And this is my brother and I, age 16, 17, with Dougie Aiken, sailing in the Queen City Regatta in early 60s, and it was blowing so hard they canceled the course racing. And they said, okay, we're going to have a round the island race. My dad was working that day, so couldn't sail. So said to his kids, his boys, his 17-year-old sons, why don't you guys take the boat? Okay, Dad. And we're not long out of junior club at this stage. We've been sailing Kisita for a couple of years, so we said, got Doug Aiken together, and we put the small jib up and full main. And this is us going, I think Jim Toole took this photograph going through the Eastern Gap. We're coming around the corner of the Eastern Gap, heading around the island. It's blowing stink. Now the plan, the race was fine. 6 meters don't have engines. And so getting back to the mooring was the next challenge. And so the plan was to come down into the cut at Queen City, as you all know, before the Rapids Queen was there. Get tucked in behind the wind shadow of the clubhouse, drop the main, lose some speed, and then curl up into that mooring you saw. Well, that was the plan. So we come roaring down the lagoon, drop the jib, kept the main up because we thought that we'd drop the main more quickly. Down the lagoon, well, the wind is going straight out of the north. It's coming straight down the lagoon. We're in a dead run. There's no wind shadow from the clubhouse. So we're going hull speed right past our mooring. The main won't come down because it's a dead run, of course. Life is full of learning experiences. And we're heading straight for the fire hall. Where my dad's working. Looking out the window. At his boat. Coming full speed straight forward. So we thought it was a bad idea to hit the wall in front of the fire hall. So we went down as far as we could, rounded up, main immediately came down, whoomp, lost speed into the wind, grabbed Finale's stern mooring tire, just like we knew what we were doing. I don't know. We were happy to be ashore in one beach. I cannot talk about history of Kisita without talking about Judy Kennedy. Judy Kennedy, I asked if she could come today. She couldn't. Judy Kennedy owned Kisita. She took it off the bottom of Port Credit Harbor. It somehow sank. She bought it, probably for not very much money, and completely had the boat restored by C&C, probably in Brooklyn's facility in 74, 75. She owned the boat until 2016, when it went west. They lived on Kisita. Now, if you've ever been down below at 6 meters, there is no room. It's like living, they actually wintered on it in Port Credit Harbor while they redid the decks. They put the teak decks on themselves. And they took the mast out and they put a stove, little stove where in the mast deck was. I said, Judy, wasn't it a bit like living in a cave? And she agreed it was a bit tight, but she and her husband Paul, they did it. And she loved this boat. She had an absolute passion for this boat. And the reason this boat exists today is because of Judy. She couldn't sail it for the last 20 years, but she was really reluctant to part with it. She kept it on hard under more or less cover in the Cobra area, I think. And then finally parted with it. Which brings us to the second restoration Kisita. And now it's spelled properly with one T, and it's Kisita 2. And if anybody knows what Kisita means, let us know, because we can't find an origin of the name. But it was bought by Rainer Mueller, who is a developer in Vancouver, who's actually Swiss. But his business is developing seniors residences in Vancouver, and has this amazing passion for 6 meters, and has restored a number of them, has bought into a number, both moderns and old. And as I say, people own anywhere from, what, a dozen to 20 of them. And the fact that the 6 meter world championship was in Vancouver in 2017 is solely because of Rainer Mueller's activities in the fleet. The Washington guys were not apparently terribly happy about having to come to Vancouver for the world championship, but they made it a joint American-Canadian sponsorship thing. Mark Wallace is a shipwright, Kit's brother, that restored Kisita, and we'll get more of that coming up. So that's what she looked like when they bought her in 2016. It needed a bit of work. But the bones were good. Mark looked at 2 or 3 other 6 meters. Unfortunately, the other ones he was looking at had fiberglass, which made restoration really virtually impossible. So they decided to buy Kisita. Judy had replaced the original wooden spar with a new Claco spar, which is there, a nice aluminum mast. The first thing they did was take the keel off it, because in the war, the Second World War, the Germans apparently had a need for lead, and so they grabbed all the keels off the boats they had in Denmark, and so it was replaced with a cast iron keel, which Mark wasn't particularly interested in maintaining, and so they took the cast iron keel off, took the rudder off, and the rudder had a classic curved shape, which we referenced again. Put the boat on a trailer and trucked it to Salt Spring Island to Mark Wallace Shipwright on Salt Spring. And I went and visited Mark on the way out to the World Championship, and I stayed in Mark's delightful little house on Salt Spring, which is beside his workshop, which is it's just almost a fairy tale kind of place. But this shed here is where he restored Kisita in that shed. And the inside of that workshop looks exactly like you'd expect the shipwright's workshop to look. It's full of tools and wood, and hanging from the ceiling is another project. Mark intends someday to rebuild for himself. It's about a 20-foot wooden little sailboat. And in behind the shop is, if anybody's interested, a Fife 6 meter, waiting for somebody to come and rest and restore it.
What sort of a budget?
Kisita took 3,000 hours of Mark's time to restore it. Now, I'm not sure what Mark charges per hour, but if you put any number beside it, times 3,000, it's a big number. I also gathered, Bob was saying saying that Woodwind Yachts has 2 6-meters, as well as a Tom Laren, Already Dad's Valhalla as a movement. So if anybody has money they don't want their children to inherit, there are 3 projects waiting for you.
And one of them is Junge.
And one is what, Bob?
Junge?
Yungay?
So, a lot of 6 meters.
Looks weird.
Did not Woodwind restore Marinito back to her former glory?
Yeah.
That's it. I didn't mention that, Alan, because I forgot to mention that Marinito eventually was completely restored and went back to Finland, where she is. So she's gone back home. Now, the first thing Mark did, and he was able to do it because he had the original drawings, is build a new keel for lead. So he built a plug and had a new keel cast, which is a smaller, because it's lead, smaller lump than the cast iron one. And then he discovered, much to his horror, that the keel, the wooden keel of Kisita was also rotten. He couldn't tell from looking at it before because it had been covered over with some finishes. And then he said, Mark, the keel was rotten when we had the boat in 1960. Because my dad had drilled holes in the keel and poured in this magic material, which my memory called the caligno, which Dad described as turning the wood, saturating wood, and becoming like a plastic yellow handles of screwdrivers. So I don't know if that's an early form of epoxy.
Get rot.
No, it wasn't get rot. It was probably a similar product to that in the 1960s. But anyway, I thought it was called caligno. But anyway, it was still rotten. And so Mark said, oh, that's why all the holes were in the keel. So unexpectedly he had to replace the keel. And he replaced every rib. And he replaced the deck. And so by the time it was over, and the keel, he figures 80% of the boat is new. So 20% of the original boat is there. So it's a big undertaking, these restoration work. So thank God there are people like Raymond Mueller who are willing to do it. And this is the boat done in the shed with the varnished top sides and the Claco mast on board, on deck. He redid the rudder, and that was the original rudder design on the drawings. And it's very reminiscent of 30 square meter rudders apparently, which again, Myers was a primary designer of. And so Mark went with the original rudder design, which is absolutely a thing of gorgeous beauty. Put the boat on a trailer, and they sent it to Vancouver for rigging. And so it got there about 2 weeks before I did. And so I arrived in time about 3 days before the regatta was supposed to start. It was me standing in front of the Royal Vancouver Yacht Club. And these are the boats registered in the classic division of the World Championship. There are 2 divisions. There's the classic division, any boat built before 1967, and the open division, any boat built after 1967. And it's not because 67 was Canada's centennial year. It was because that was the year Sparkling Sea was designed Intrepid for the America's Cup. And that essentially revolutionized the design of meter boats. They went with a shorter keel, they went with a separated rudder, and completely changed the rules on meter boat design. So they didn't look like Marinito anymore. And so any boat built after 67 sails in a separate class, and they are slightly faster. But there's some names on the skipper's list you might recognize. That is the King of Spain, who advocated so son could sail. That crew's been sailing together for 30 years in 6 meters. There's Lars Gott is actually a multi-hull sailor from Rhode Island who is a multiple American champion in multi-hulls. One of our crew essentially said, if you Google anybody on this list, they're all famous. Lee Anderson is a Canadian 470 sailor, Olympic sailor, out of Vancouver. And what Rainer Mueller would do, he owns all these boats, so for the championship, he lent them to people to form a crew. And Kisita became the Salt Spring Island crew. He got contacted Lee and said, why don't you put a woman's crew together? And so he gave her Lenora to sail. And I was talking to Lee at one of the social functions, and she was decrying the fact that, they only got the boat in June, and so they only had 4 months to prepare. We got into the boat to sell the first race for the first time. So we thought only 4 months was an interesting complaint. The boat beside us in mooring is Lars Grail. Torben and Lars were brothers. They sailed together this weekend with their wife. Between them, they had 7 Olympic medals. So this is the level of people we're sailing against in this regatta. There's another guy on this list too, you might recognize. This guy here? Dennis Connor races 6 meters and has showed up for the regatta. And the other
British boat.
And
U.S.
the boats are all mixed up as to who owns what and who's sailing what and what nationalities they are. So I haven't quite figured this out. Lucy has a Swedish flag?
Yeah.
But it's an American boat, so I don't understand that.
Finland.
Sorry, Finnish flag. The Finns 6 meter class in Finland is still very strong, especially the classic. The Finns had the biggest national contingent at this regatta. They have 4 boats at this regatta. They brought two of their own, and they chartered 2, both models and classics. And the other person to meet is Eric Jesperson out of Vancouver, sailing the famous Goose. And Eric is past winner. It is a Canadian Olympian as well in the star class, and is past winner of the 6 meter world championship in the previous years.
What's the flag for flapper?
Flag for
Flapper?
where's
Lars.
Recycling.
Lars Gott.
this one here?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was Taiwan.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, and why Lars Gott, who's an American, is sailing a boat that's got a Norwegian registry with I gave up trying to figure this out. But that's only that's 21 boats in the classic fleet, and there are 23 boats in the modern fleet, or the open class.
Why not the kind?
She's still owned by that. Still owned by that.
Oh, this is a shot of the classics all in a row at Royal Vancouver Yacht Club. I have to acknowledge photographers here. One nice thing about world-class regattas is you get professional photographers showing up, taking great pictures. A lot of the photographs in this presentation are taken by Neil Rabinowitz, who is there. So this is one of his photographs. Nancy Bernard took some of them. And some amateur photographers, Bob Stevenson here took some great pictures, which are in the presentation, and Pam and I took some pictures as well. But this is a professional one. And this is all the 6 meters lined up, and they're lined up in chronological order of age. Starting with the oldest on the left, and going more modern to the 40s here. And Kisita is, finally Kisita down here, yeah, there's Kisita there.
Big difference in being.
And as I said, on the dock, they're each had a place name where we're supposed to go. And a close-up of Kisita, while everybody else is having a good time chatting, we're still working on the boat. So more of that coming up. But they are gorgeous, and it was just fun walking the dock and looking at them. These are some of Bob's photographs. They are just beautifully maintained boats on the whole. Now the moderns are a different kettle of fish, the open class. That's what they look like. A lot of them are still wood because they're not production boats. They're one-off custom built boats. And I don't think that there's 2 6 meters the same. And I was discussing this with Mark, and we were thinking whether that was a class rule. And my brother Rob said, probably not a rule, but in fact, each boat is commissioned by an owner from a naval architect. So the owner owns the plans for the boat. Bob?
Isn't the IOD effectively a one design 6?
International One Design?
Yeah.
It's smaller, isn't it?
I thought it was.
Certainly there, maybe, but it's not a 6 meter.
No.
But it's not a 6 meter. So virtually there are no 2 6 meters the same. Lenora and Goose are reputed to be virtually the same because they're both part of the same size. And the front end of the moderns there. And this is what a modern looks like underwater. This is the Swiss boat, Junior, who has won the World Championship a number of times, and these guys are serious. And you can tell, compare that shape to the earlier view of Marinito, and it's just completely different. The girth measurement, the difference of is this dimension here, and this looks like a straight line to me, which means that number is 0, again, which helps the reading. They fiddle with the bow here to shorten the waterline length. The rudder is now completely separate, as I mentioned on the modern 12s. And the general consensus is the hull design on the Metre boats has gone about as far as they'll go in speed. All the research and development now is not in the keel, it's in the wings. Because you can see just off the end of this keel are the wings.
Is that a trim tab?
Here?
Yes.
I can't tell you. Looks like it might be. Looks like it might be. But the difference in the boat speeds now is in the evolution of those wings. And they're starting to, one was a Canadian boat there, had the wings actually adjustable, which is against the rules to do it during a race, but it means they can adjust them between races without having to haul the boat. So the class, that's why they split the class in 2. And I was talking to an owner of an older open boat without wings, and he says he can hang on in a race with the winged keels like up to about 12 knots. Then at about 12 knots, there's somebody going faster and heading higher. And there's nothing he can do about it. You just watch them pull away. But when we got to the yacht club, Kisita wasn't ready. Wasn't anywhere close to ready. And you notice that nice tan-colored claco mass isn't there anymore. It didn't measure in. It was about 2 millimeters too wide. So they had to jump the mast, and at the last minute look for a replacement mast, which is this one, off another boat, converter to fit Kisita, with a suit of sails that were hand-me-downs to at the last minute to fit this mast. And there is not one running piece of rope on this boat when we got there. The backstays were simply tied off with a bit of rope. So we spent 3 solid days rigging this boat, and it was fun, but not. We were planning to practice it, sailing the boat, not rigging it. But this is the crew, and actually you couldn't ask for a greater bunch of guys to sail with. They're all from Salt Spring Island, all belong to the Salt Spring Island Yacht Club. 5 fellow on the left is Paul. He was the helmsman. He's actually from Seattle and has moved to Salt Spring Island, so he knew a lot of the guys at the regatta from Seattle. Ole, beside him, was in the pit and did the spinnaker hoists and the jib, and the halyard stuff and jib sheets. He's Danish, ironically, because the boat's Danish, and he owns a CNC something or other, a big modern CNC in Salt Spring. Dougie, the next one, it was foredeck. Now, the interesting story with Dougie being foredeck. When I was first contacted to crew, I said, I'll do anything on the boat just to be there. You just tell me what you want me to do, and I'll do it. And I got a phone call from one of the crew members who said, Ron, I've been designated as foredeck, but I don't really want to do foredeck. But if I don't do foredeck, they'll find somebody else, and I can't sail on the boat. Would you do foredeck? I said, I'll do anything you want me to do on the boat. So I went out there. The idea was to go out there a week early to Salt Spring to practice. When I got there, I discovered I wasn't foredeck. They've got Doug, this young 40-year-old, to be foredeck, and I was suddenly backstay at main sheet. And then partway through the second race, Ole, who's in front of me on the boat, turns to me and says, "You're a lot sprier than I thought you were going to be." So it suddenly occurred to me that these guys panicked that there's going to be a 70-year-old on the foredeck. And they're wondering how to get wheelchair assist up there. But anyway, it worked out well because Doug was much more alive than I was up there. And that's me, and that's Mark Wallace, who actually crewed on the boat too, and is the guy that rebuilt Kisita. And we had a great time together. Learning how to sail 6 meters and putting this boat together. And that's Dougie up the ring, putting something together. Doug turned out to be a great addition. Even though he missed the first 2 races because of confusion on scheduling, he is an amateur rigger. So he was very useful in putting stuff together and had no hesitation going to the top of the mast at the least provocation. This is what the cockpit looks like, to give you some idea of the sailing in this leather slot. The original boat did not have one big cockpit. Mark put one big cockpit in to make it easier to sail the boat short-handed. A lot of pictures of 6 meters you see with a helm and a cockpit and a separate crew cockpit, or sometimes even 3 separate cockpits. There's a limit on how big those openings can be in the rules, and Kisita is the narrowest 6 meter anybody knows of. It's 5'8" wide, which is less than the present rule of minimum 6 feet. And his theory was building a Kisita is why they made it 6 feet minimum, but she still measures it as 6. And so this long narrow cockpit means you're one in front of the other on the boat all the time, and it's tight. But we've got more strings now than we had before. This is what she looks like inside. This is looking forward. It is just a tube of a boat, very simple, all wood. And again, because it was a bare boat when we got it, it doesn't have any place to store anything. There's no bags. So winch handles are on the floor, all sheets are on the floor, lunches are on the floor. Everything's sort of shoved together. But you can see a lot of the strings we put on. These are the tweakers for the spinnaker guide. This whole cleat jam system for control lines we put on, put all the lines on, and all the other running rigging. This is a shot looking aft. The only seat in the boat, of course, is the helmsman's seat. So you either stand or you sit at the bottom.
Or kneel.
Or you kneel. A lot of standing. Mark developed this little even further step down in the middle where we dropped that further. Back here, right about here, is a handle for the pump, which was right under my feet. So we'll come to that later. but again, just a work of art inside. This is the man himself. This is Rainer Mueller, who, there's Bob Stevens there. No, Bob there, sorry. Rainer is the guy who is the reason all this exists. And he's not a particularly good sailor, but he's a passionate sailor, especially on 6 meters. So he came down to visit the boat because he had heard the story about my dad owning the boat. And another coincidence is Mueller is a client of my old engineering company. And so my old engineering company actually had decided to sponsor the regatta, be a sponsor in the regatta. And when they heard about my involvement in it, they switched the sponsorship from general to the boat. And so we had a, so there's all sorts of connections with Kisita.
Like that.
Yes, again, there's a joint American-Canadian regatta. And that's me as the boat, of course. 6 meters don't have engines, so there's a lot of paddling getting in and out of the moorings at Royal Vancouver. They had towboats waiting at the narrow entrance to grab boats and sort of pull them through the opening. But in the morning, the chaos of the classics backing into the moderns to get turned around 90 degrees and then out this spot was great fun. And not to mention the chaos getting back in. But after 20 years on land and at least 50 years since it last raced, and probably 60 years from when it had an open cockpit, here she is sailing in Vancouver Harbor. You'll notice the block to block on the main. Again, we had a mainsail that was at least 8 inches too long on the hoist for the mast we had, and there's no way we could get it pulled down. The mast was way too flexible for the sail we had, so we had always had these huge stretch marks down the main. We ended up putting in additional tank backstay on the spreaders to help keep the mast straight, which helped. We didn't do that until halfway through the regatta. We didn't get the main cut down until after the 3rd race, when we discovered that, again, what's nice about a world championship is North has a guy on site the whole time with a truck. And so if you want sail repair done, you just talk to the North guy and he does it. And the sail comes back next morning done. It was great, but again, it wasn't optimum conditions for the boat. What happened was we worked on the boat 3 solid days getting it ready. Doug, the foredeck guy, couldn't arrive till Friday. The practice race was on Thursday. We couldn't make that. Good thing, we were going 20 knots. There was a 2-day regatta before the World Championship on the Friday, Saturday. There was a delay in the start on the Friday because of light wind. Suddenly, at noon on Friday, the skipper, Paul, looked up and said, after we worked the boat for 4 days getting it ready, I think we can go sailing. Let's go racing. So we actually took the boat out and made the first start of the Friday race with 4 on board instead of 5. None of us ever having sailed together before, raced together before, and none of us ever having sailed this boat before. And so we started, that's how we started the regatta. That's why we thought Lee Anderson's comment about only having 4 months to get ready was particularly funny. But we did it amazingly well. But it did leak. It had been out of the water a long time. What was in the water was okay, but as soon as the boat heeled, water poured in everywhere. And so for the first 3 days, I was on my hands and knees over top of that pump, pumping like crazy. And the crew said the only thing they ever saw me was my back end for 2 races. But after, and Mark had actually glued the planks together during the construction, and all those, they split. And his concern was because he varnished the boat, stained it dark, the dark color absorb too much heat. So the next time you see the boat, it might be painted white.